welcome back to another ride along with Indoor Environmental Safe Space. On this ride home, I wanted to talk to you about a phone call I got from a good friend. She said, I have been looking up information on the internet. Everyone, all these experts, everyone on the internet has a different opinion. Half the people say you must throw away everything and burn your house down and move to a desert in Arizona or you'll never get well. There's a whole nother camp that says, oh, mold isn't really that bad for you and everything's overblown and you really don't have to do much of anything. She said, how do I know what's real? How do I know what the truth is? And why is there so much false information on the internet? So the fact is that no one is trying to give us false information. And in my belief, I think everybody out there that's giving opinions is truly trying to be helpful. But first, let's address the topic of expert, the term expert. And you'll see people on the internet saying, I am a mold expert. Now, the term expert is not legally defined to my knowledge. I mean, I'm not an attorney, but I think anyone out there can call themselves an expert, and the requirements or the bars that they hold themselves accountable to meeting or achieving or exceeding in order to call themselves experts varies widely from person to person. One individual may call themselves an expert simply because they had mold in their house at one point and they were able to get better from it, so they consider themselves an expert. Others may have PhDs in microbiology and they are very well qualified from that perspective. Medical practitioners, my hat's off to medical practitioners. I'm amazed constantly with just the absolute brilliance of the practitioners that I work with on a regular basis. But in the end, you really never know if the individual or the content you're listening to, if that person's truly an expert, unless you thoroughly vet them and thoroughly look into their backgrounds. And even then, keep in mind, every person on the internet or every person everywhere, whether an expert or not, has an opinion. And I think the fallacy comes into play when people start expressing opinions as facts when in fact they're not facts. They're opinions, or they may be facts, but they may be very situational facts that only apply to a very specific circumstance. And when it comes to indoor environmental exposure issues, it's a multi-variable equation that's very complex. Indoor environmental exposure and environmental exposure issues have to do with what agents you're being exposed to, whether it's molds or bacterias, endotoxins, mycotoxins, dust mites, insect fragments, pollens, danders, etc. There's a whole host of things that could be impacting our health in an indoor environment, and what you're being exposed to is all of these different agents added together in different quantities. So it's what you're being exposed to, the amount you're being exposed to, for how long you're being exposed to it. A lot of your own personal history comes into play. Your underlying health, your overall healthiness level, the way you eat, your diet, the level of exercise you get, your genetics. So I think you can quickly see by these last factors that, hey, wait a minute, the last things he just mentioned are unique to me as an individual. These people on the internet don't know me as an individual. They don't know how sensitive or how resistant I am to exposure to mold or exposure to bacteria or exposure to dust mites. So when people on the internet are giving you opinions that, oh, if you've had mold in your home, you must throw out anything in your home that's covered in fabric. It'll never get clean enough for you to be able to be around it. Well, I can tell you unequivocally, that's absolutely true in some cases. And it's also unequivocally untrue in just as many, if not even more cases, because we have to factor in the individual and how their system is going to react. You can have people highly react to extremely small exposures, and you can have people that barely react to what would be considered a very heavily contaminated environment and a very heavy exposure. It all depends on that individual and what their immune system response is going to be, and that is as unique to each individual as our fingerprints are. So keep in mind, If you're experiencing environmental exposure issues or have been exposed to mold and you're trying to find a path to getting better, remember that you're a unique individual and your path to getting better is going to be as unique as you are. And that's why I always believe in starting with the least expensive, most likely to succeed approach first. And let's see if that works for you. So if you're trying to cure yourself from indoor environmental exposure issues, I would recommend not buying into the dogma that we must take the most extreme approach first, unless you have the discretionary income that it's not going to be a big burden. I mean, it would be ideal and it would be amazing if every person that has mold exposure or an indoor environmental exposure issue could go to the absolute platinum standard of doing the best of everything and getting the best of everything to give themselves the 99.999% chance that their environment's going to be fine. But the reality is most of us live with constraints, financial constraints, resource constraints, life constraints that we all have to juggle and balance. So I usually advise my client patients to try what works for the vast majority of people. Let's see if it works for you. If it doesn't work for you, we will escalate from there. We will take the next step. We will continue until we get this environment to be good enough for you as a unique individual. That's the most cost-effective way to approach it. And in my mind, it's the most sensible way to approach it. So I hope this information helps you out there. If you've been on the internet and you've gone down the rabbit hole and it makes you feel like everything is trying to kill you and you have to get rid of everything, hopefully this helps balance things out a little bit. People out there are trying to help you, but take everything you hear and see on the internet with a big, giant grain of salt, including what you're hearing from me. So with that in mind, my name's Mike McNatt with Indoor Environmental Safe Space. Thanks for riding with me today. It's been a pleasure. And I look forward to seeing you next time. Here at Indoor Environmental Safe Space, we always wish you and your loved ones health and happiness in your indoor environmental safe space. I look forward to seeing you next time. Take care until then. Bye-bye.